Welcome into a Thursday, June 26th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. And oh boy, things are happening. Plenty to get to today on the show. We are live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, as always, looking for your inbox questions. We're also going to be joined by Matthew Fairburn in a little bit to talk Buffalo Sabres. We're also a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today and use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Tyler Yaremchuk, Frank Seravalli with you. And Frank Seravalli, did you sleep? I mean, you're breaking the Peterka deal. You're breaking a new CBA. Do you want me to do the show? You can take a 30-minute snooze.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to, but I don't think my phone's going to stop buzzing. So I guess I'm in for the next 30 and beyond. But yeah, I highly do not recommend back-to-back red eyes out to LA and back at the Board of Governors meeting yesterday and now back on the East Coast.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I heard your phone ding twice while I did my opening ad read. So things are happening. Lots to get to, like I said. So let's kick things off with the first story you broke yesterday. Frank, JJ Peterka has found his way to Utah. It is a mammoth deal at the beginning of the offseason as Bill Armstrong takes a big swing. Not only does he land Peterka, but he signs the German forward to a 5-year, $7.7 million AAV contract. Let's start there. What do you like about this fit between the Mammoth and Peterka?
Oh man, what's to not like about this fit for Utah Mammoth? I mean, you take an already young core that's exciting, dynamic, and has speed, and you inject a 23-year-old first-line winger who is your goal-scoring winger that you've been on a quest to find that, oh, by the way, has basically touched 30 goals twice and is a 70-point player as a 23-year-old. Like, the fact that he was on the move from Buffalo was, in and of itself a big enough story, but to land with Utah, a team that has so much on the rise, and to give up pieces that are really not critical core components to your team and not any of your picks or prospects, this is sort of the ultimate win. And this is one of those situations where when you stockpile assets, a great example of how Bill Armstrong was able to leverage them. Michael Kesselring, big right shot defenseman who's on a great contract that will ultimately need to be paid. And Josh Doan, a guy who played half the year last year in the American League, has a high ceiling, but is already the same age as Peterka. And Peterka is a couple 20-goal seasons into his career, nearly 30-goal seasons into his career.
Yeah, I love it. And you start to look at this Utah forward group. Peterka joins Keller and Gunther and Cooley. And you can even look at pieces they have coming in a Teja Ginla or Daniil Boot, who's coming over from Russia. Like, man, there is a lot of talent in that forward group. And again, just from talking to you on shows and listening, Frank, Utah's not done, are they? Like, they might take another big swing here.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they are done. I think Bill Armstrong's got lots of irons in the fire, and I think they're a team to watch because I've said it many times going back to last calendar year that there's so few teams, maybe no team is better positioned in the NHL for the present and the future than Utah Hockey Club, and they're able to flex some of that muscle. Now Utah Mammoth on Wednesday.
Yeah, and I mean, we got a comment in here from Padre who says, what a brutal blue line. Who's going to play defense? I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I like Sergachev and Dursey, Marino. They got some good vets in Mata and Cole. And then even look at who's coming in that system as well. They have the big Russian Simishev they're bringing over. They have Maverick Lamoureux. Like, they, even with Kesselring gone, they have pieces on the blue line.
They were probably going to have to trade Kesselring at some point anyway, because not to say that he couldn't have stayed, but might have been the odd man out with all the guys that you just named. So whether it was now or later on, the fact that you're able to bring back someone like Peterka is just the ultimate home run.
So then let's talk about the Buffalo side of this. I like Doan. I really like Kesselring. I mean, a massive right shot defenseman who has a hammer of a shot. Like, those are both good pieces, but I'm still left feeling a little bit underwhelmed from a Buffalo perspective. Is that fair?
I think underwhelmed is the correct feeling if you're a Sabres fan. Probably if you're admittedly even in the Sabres front office. You traded a player that you didn't want to move. The issue ended up making an inevitability that Peterka was going to be moving on one way or the other. And it put everyone in a really uncomfortable position, forcing Kevin Adams to act. And he did. And you get back a really impressive player in Kesselring, but it doesn't have the same ceiling or impact as someone like a Peterka could. And Josh Doan could be something, but he's still got a lot to prove to be a consistent full-time NHL contributor and producer. That it's a hope. It's not a defined asset at this exact moment in time. So it's a bet placed. And I think what's really kind of from the underwhelming perspective, what stands out for me is there just was such a big market for JJ Peterka. There was all sorts of kind of deals that that Kevin Adams could have gotten his hands on. There's one team who offered 2 first-round picks plus 2 roster players. I think the St. Louis Blues had Jordan Kyrou on the table. At one point in time, the New York Islanders were talking about Noah Dobson, and you smash all those things together and you go, Kesselring and Doan, like that just doesn't, it's not getting anyone excited in Western New York, and I understand why, especially when you have to give up on a guy that was a fan favorite.
We will go out to Western New York for our big segment today, as I said off the top, and talk a little bit more about this trade. But let's get to some of the news that broke this morning, Frank. Jamie Benn is staying put in Dallas. It is a 1-year deal that comes with a $1 million base for the Stars captain, but bonuses could push it up to $3 million. The big thing for the Dallas Stars is that if you don't have the cap space, and those bonuses just push to next season. So for Jim Nill, you bring back your captain and you push the problem down the road a little bit in terms of the money.
Yeah, and with the cap increasing, essentially what you would be doing if he is to hit all of those bonuses, which is definitely not a guarantee when you consider Western Conference champs and Stanley Cup champs are part of it, that you're essentially devoting part of next year's salary cap raise to Jamie Benn. And so the key here for the Stars is keeping their captain on a $1 million base salary, extremely affordable. A guy who is a heart and soul player who really wanted to stay with this team when there were probably going to be other options elsewhere that would have paid him 3x of like in total dollars of what he's ended up getting from the Dallas Stars this time around, maybe even 4 or 5. That he really wanted to stay and be part of Dallas is my understanding. And he wants to get the job done and have this team get over the top with him part of it. Now, some other moving parts for Dallas. We're still keeping an eye on Matt Dumba and Ilya Lyubushkin on the back end. The Stars are inching closer toward making a coaching hire. I would think that Glenn Gulletson is the favorite there, but they have not made a call on that decision just yet, is my understanding. And what else can Jim Nill get up to? I'm thinking that Jason Robertson is a much less likely piece to be on the move, but I can never really rule out the Stars in terms of what happens next because they're a team that also wants to get better.
Yeah, so right now they have about $900,000 in cap space. If they were to buy out Matt Dumba, it frees up 2.3. So if they were to go down that route, they would have $3.2 million with 10 forwards, defensemen, and 2 goalies on their roster. So basically $3.2 million to sign 2 or 3 players and put them on their roster. So again, the situation, even with a Dumba buyout, remains very tight in Dallas, and we'll see if Jim Nill has anything else creative up his sleeve to create some cap flexibility there. Just cleaning up on the news and note front before we talk CBA, Frederick Gaudreau has been traded to the Seattle Kraken from the Minnesota Wild. It's a mid-round pick going the other way. So Seattle, kind of similar to what they did with the Marchment deal, goes, hey, there's a useful player that we like and we can get without giving up a lot. And for Minnesota, they create a little bit more salary cap flexibility, but they had 11 players signed in on their roster. This also creates a bit of roster flexibility for them, right?
Yeah, I think they just were seeking a fresh start, something different, new blood. I don't think it's necessarily anything connected to something hot coming down the pike, at least at this moment in time for Minnesota, but they're still working on the Rossi situation. We'll see how that shakes out. I think they're thinking that at some point, if they don't have the right deal materialize, that they're going to have to bring him back. And just some other quick news and notes. Jay Woodcroft joining the Anaheim Ducks as an assistant on Joel Quenneville's staff. And the San Jose Sharks have placed veteran defenseman Mark-Edward Vlasic on unconditional waivers for purposes of a buyout. He's in the last year of his deal. His minutes had dropped off significantly and played so few games last season. He gets 2/3 to not play this upcoming season. So his career, his NHL career, is likely over. So we had listed him as a buyout a few weeks ago, buyout candidate, and the Sharks make that official today for Vlasic.
Yeah, not like the Sharks needed money, but similar to the TJ Brody thing, Frank, where they're just opening up the roster spot and in a way, I guess, maybe doing right by the player. I know you just kind of said his career might be over, but at least if Vlasic wanted to, he could put his hand up to the league and be like, I'll play again. Like, let me play. Yeah.
Well, but the other part is too, like it's a lot of work, right? It's a big commitment to get ready for a season. And when you're 39 years old and you barely played last year as it was, your body, I'm sure, has had some significant wear and tear. He's like 1,300 and some games into his career. I don't know that you're like absolutely itching to get back out there again. We'll see.
$91 million in career earnings for Marc-Edouard Vlasic. That is
He's doing
not
good.
too shabby. That's good. Okay, we're going to talk Sabres again in a couple of minutes here, Frank, but you broke the story this morning that a new CBA is coming. The NHL and the PA are preparing to announce a new CBA framework on Friday, and there are a lot of interesting changes coming with this announcement. So let's kind of go through a few of them. Listen, an 84-game regular season, I don't think any hockey fan is complaining about fewer preseason games and more actual meaningful hockey games.
Yeah, it's a significant increase in revenue. So you've got 2 games with 32 teams. You're adding 75 million bucks in hockey related revenue to the pot, something like that.
Yeah.
Some interesting wrinkles with regards to the preseason, that players who have played 100 career games or more can only play a maximum of 2 preseason games. So that's music to their ears. But when you look at this list, Tyler, what stands out to you as most interesting? Like, what gets you excited moving forward?
The player term, I think, is the big one, especially because we're right around the free agency point. So it's a maximum of 7 years for players who are returning to their teams and 6 years for true unrestricted free agents who are moving on to a new team. So again, each of those limits get dropped by 1, with the cap continuing to shoot up the way it's going to continue to shoot up. And this term limit changing, Frank, it'll again require us to sort of readjust how we imagine AAVs.
Yeah, we're going to have to rewire our brains a bit. A reminder, these changes don't kick in until 2026. So free agency this summer and actually probably even next summer could be the same. We'll see what how they actually manage all that. But look, there are definitely some changes here, and as much as there are some things that you look at that are wins for players, there's a playoff bonus share that's increased. Their benefits have been increased and they get taken care of in a big way. The establishment of a e-bug full-time permanent backup. Revenue split remains the same at 50-50. No changes in definition. So we're not having any funny business on that end. But there are some serious contractual limitations that have been placed on players aside from the term limits that we're just beginning to learn about and wrap our brains around. And I'll give you an example is signing bonus. I just tweeted a few minutes ago that signing bonus now will be limited to a 60% ceiling. What does that mean? Well, before, let's say, just keep numbers easy, you had a $10 million a year contract and you wanted to earn as much as possible in signing bonus. You could take everything but the league minimum in signing bonus because you wanted it for tax reasons or for making it buyout proof or whatever it is that you wanted to do, investment purposes. You want to get your hands on cash as soon as you can. Well, now it's limited to 60%. So if you have a $10 million a year deal, you can only get as much as 60% of the deal in signing bonus. You can get more after that, but that's then subject to a buyout calculation. So there's definitely some other changes that are going to be coming that are probably big wins for NHL GMs and owners that we're still just figuring out.
As we continue to talk some big changes, like the one that a lot of hockey fans are going to give a standing ovation to is, the closing of the LTIR loophole, if you want to phrase it that way. You called it a comprehensive playoff salary cap mechanism. And Frank, listen, I'm applauding this. This is good. Teams won't be able to time surgeries and do all that anymore. There's also a little part of me that's like, is this opening Pandora's box? Are there going to be some unintended consequences? Could this make the trade deadline more boring if teams are like, oh shit, we don't have this money to go out and spend? Are we going to get to a point where there could be a team in the playoffs that goes, oh man, we have this $5 million player, or we have 2 $4 million players, and every game we have to be healthy scratching one of them? Like, there is a bit of a domino effect here.
There might be, and I'll just say that's another thing that I wasn't comfortable sharing all the details on because it's complicated, and we're going to see how the mechanism work. Everyone might put teams that want to acquire a player for a legitimate injury when it comes to the finishing off the regular season that they might think twice about, to your point. So, look, this is still the very early stages. A lot of this obviously has been kept under wraps and something that we're, just beginning to wrap our own heads around and digest it all, just as the players and the teams and executives, members of the board of governors are also doing the same.
Yeah, the final details on all of that stuff, like to hear the wording on how this salary cap mechanism is going to work. I mean, it's nerdy, but I'm really, really intrigued to see how that all plays out. Let's go to our big segment. Oh, sorry.
I just want to say before we move on, like just how big of a deal that this is to get labor peace and continuity for the NHL, for business, for the game, because we haven't had a lot of this. And to get it done so far ahead of the expiration next September, to have that done and signed and know that for the next half a decade that you're going to be well set up and players don't have to think about what the next version of this looks like and there's no negotiation for a while. To have that labor piece achieved is a huge step for the game moving forward. And it's been something that's been missing for a long time. It's nice to see these two sides who have said all along that it's so amicable and a great working relationship that we've now gotten to the other end of that, and that remains true. And they're now in lockstep moving forward.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. Like for Marty Walsh and Gary Bettman and both sides, like we never got like any sort of posturing in the media or any sort of games like that. This thing was done not just drama free, but like they were holding hands the whole time.
Maybe a perfect segue to Matthew Fairburn. They put their swords down.
There you go. Let's get to the big segment today. It's the All 32, and it's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. You can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program, and it all comes with their unbeatable pricing policy. You can also apply for a Charm Diamond Flexity card today and get approved for no interest financing on your purchase in minutes. For more info on all of that, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. Matthew Fairburn covers the Buffalo Sabres for The Athletic, joining us to talk about the big deal that went down yesterday. And Matthew, the Sabres get, I think, undoubtedly 2 good roster players in this deal. But listening to Frank talk earlier, there were first-round picks being offered and other things of that ilk. What do you make of Kevin Adams' approach to take right now assets that can contribute over maybe getting more, I'll put it in air quotes, value that could have came in the form of futures?
I think he kind of had to do it, right? I mean, he's entering year 6 as general manager. If he's not under pressure now to win, then he never will be. I mean, he's talked going back to the deadline about trades they make, wanting to make their team better. I don't think it would have been possible to sell to the fan base getting rid of Peterka for a first-round pick or a prospect and asking these people who have waited 14 years for playoff hockey to wait even longer for this to work itself out. Even thinking, they needed to address like real needs. And so maybe do they give up a little bit of value? Possibly, but they get a really hard piece to acquire in a right-handed defenseman who could potentially play in the top 4. I mean, he probably will play in the top 4. How well he can handle it remains to be seen. And I think Josh Doan is the type of forward that they don't have enough of. So I don't think they went into the offseason thinking we've got to trade JJ Peterka, but I think the situation dictated that as the months went by.
So Matthew, I want to take a step back and maybe a 30,000 foot view here, because Kevin Adams has been raked over the coals in the last 12 to 18 hours. Sabres fans feel that this return is underwhelming. Should we wait to see what happens next with Bowen Byram, because they've had a heavy left side of their defense? They were obviously looking for a right side defenseman and they get one in Kesselring. But if you now trade Bowen Byram and you're able to get a forward back in return who might be up to Peterka's level, not saying that's definitely going to happen, it's hard to do, but if you were to pull that off, then maybe we should wait to judge and see the totality of Kevin Adams' moves instead of just trying to look at it through one lens. Is that fair?
I think that's totally fair. I also think that the initial knee-jerk reaction to an extent from the fan base is fair, because Kevin Adams hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt over the last 5 years. And I think the big piece that they haven't earned the benefit of the doubt on is that they're going to use this cap savings, right? Because essentially it's about $5 million in savings based on the deal that Peterka got. But I think your point is a good one. There's a lot of moving pieces in Buffalo, as you know, as you've been reporting on throughout the offseason. This was just the biggest piece. There's more to come, and there has to be more to come based on how the roster looks. I look at it as, for a lot of years, it seemed like Kevin Adams was collecting talent, but not doing a great job of building a team. This feels like a team building move to address some real needs that they have, and to, yeah, are you shipping out a productive player who's 23 years old, who's homegrown? Like, the optics are not great, but Peterka's also not perfect. Utah's taking maybe more of a gamble than a lot of people realize. They look at this guy as a surefire superstar, but the defensive metrics are a little bit concerning. His shooting percentage was really high this year. And actually, what's interesting is when he was playing away from Tage Thompson, he was significantly worse in terms of his on-ice metrics. And Tage Thompson was actually better when Zach Benson was on his wing. So I don't think it's a slam dunk that JJ Peterka is going to be the next Sam Reinhart, right? And they're going to regret this for years to come. Like you said, let's see how the rest of the offseason comes together for the Sabres, what the team looks like in a week or 2 weeks from now. I understand that Kevin Adams hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not going to sit here and, completely judge his offseason based off one trade here on June 26th.
Okay, so I want to drill down also on the financial part of this, because you mentioned it, and I'm really curious to see what happens next on this front, because I believe that there were other deals on the table to be made, including Jordan Kyrou coming over from St. Louis, which you would think, for a guy who's actually put up better numbers than Peterka, obviously a bit older, but still in the prime of his career, but has a huge term and dollar amount remaining on his deal. I'm wondering if that was part of the calculus here, that, hey, maybe they can't take on a contract like that. What have you heard about the internal budget mechanisms that are in place for the Sabres, and how much will that dictate what happens next?
They say year after year that there's no internal cap, there's no internal budget, but they're the only team in the league that has left at least $6 million of cap space on the table each of the last 5 years, when we've been in a salary cap environment where everybody's scraping for every single dollar and then me on the table. What I'll say about this in particular, I've seen a few people say, like, oh, they were unwilling to commit to JJ Peterka. I don't believe that. I don't think that they were unwilling to commit to the player. This is a favorite of Terry Pegula. I think they probably viewed him as part of the core, and would it have been a perfectly clean negotiation? Probably not. That number is pretty high, but I don't think financially they were unwilling to commit to Peterka. What's interesting, though, is, like you said, some of these other deals, their salary cap situation actually isn't all that good, despite all the money that they had left on the table, because they have Bowen Byram, whatever they decide to do with him. Ryan McLeod's number is probably going to come in somewhere between $4 and $5 million, if I had to guess. And then you've got Devin Levi, Jack Quinn, Jacob Bernard Docker, some work to do around the edges. This Peterka deal frees up a ton of money. So let their actions, speak for them, because in the last 5 years, their actions have said that there is some sort of internal budget that they're not trying to surpass. But if you're not going to spend to the cap this year with the amount of pressure on Kevin Adams, then I just feel like, but now it feels like it might be hard, right? They've got a lot of space. So the piece that comes back in the Byram deal, assuming a Byram deal happens at some point, has to be significant and probably has to have some salary. The other tricky part, though, about the salary piece is that a lot of guys that have the big numbers have clauses, no trade clauses, no movement clauses. Kyrou is an exception, right? That would have been one, but then you're trading forward for forward and you're still looking for a right-handed defenseman. But some of these other guys that have these big numbers, they're either they have the clause and probably have Buffalo on their list, or, take like a Rasmus Anderson in Calgary. He's a year away from unrestricted free agency. are you just renting a player for a year who's not going to commit to you? So that's a legitimate problem that they deal with as well.
So you mentioned off the top that this is a move in the Peterka for Doan and Kesselring, a move towards like building a team and not just building up talent. And I really liked that line. If you're going to do that, you probably got to commit all the way to doing that. So when we look at a potential Bowen Byram deal, if it is a forward coming in, what's the archetype of player here? What style of player do you think they need to add to this forward group to continue going along the lines of building a true team?
Brian Rust is the name I've had circled for the Sabres as kind of an ideal player type in terms of veteran, productive, just a true pro. That they need more adults in the room, more pros, guys that have been through it, guys that have played in the playoffs, that know what it looks like. And that trade clause of his expires, at the start of the new league year, and that's a team to get younger. Byram is kind of a weird fit there because they've got a crowded blue line. I'm sure they'd like to have Byram instead of some of the guys that they have, but they're not going to be easily moved, those other guys. So that's a little bit tricky. The other part of this, I think, is that it's not far-fetched, and I don't know that they'll do this, but the idea of keeping Byram isn't the worst idea in the world either. If you can convince him to buy in for a couple of years, he's a couple of years away from UFA, but a top pair of Byram and Dahlin with Power and Kesselring, like that's a good top four. That's a strength. Who's playing with Dahlin if you trade Byram? That becomes the next question, right? Every move, requires you to make another move to backfill what you've just done. So I think if they are trading Byram, they have to have a plan to fill that spot, because Matthias Samuelsson next to Dahlin is just not the best plan. It's worked at times in the past, but given his injury history and the results he's had over the last few years, I think you're taking a huge risk if you're starting the season with Samuelsson, Dahlin. So Rust is the first name that comes to mind when you're talking about forwards, but it's got to be, they've got to thread the needle there with an experienced guy. You want a guy that can get to the net, a guy that can forecheck, a guy that has experience, which, by the way, all those things that JJ Peterka didn't really have. So that's why I say I'm not opposed to the idea that they can come out of all of this a week from now as a better team than they were at the beginning of the week.
Kevin Adams going to keep on swinging. You can read his work at The Athletic. Matthew, appreciate your time. Thanks for popping on.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, Frank, we got a couple of, we got a whole bunch of people in the YouTube once again, and they all want updates on their favorite teams. I'm just going to randomly throw a few at you. We got one in here. What is Washington going to do? This one's from Beckard. Caps news, or are they not doing anything?
I think they're going to be relatively quiet. I think they've just got such an exciting pipeline of players that I don't know that you want to really acquire a ton to block any of those spots. And beyond that, I think this is a team that so far exceeded expectations last year. So many players having career years that I think you have to keep some realistic expectations that there might be a little bit of a dip after that. So my big question is, who are the real Washington Capitals?
Yeah, and I think that's a really fair question. We got one in here from Troy Nowak, who wants to know, are there any rumors surrounding Columbus? Frank, is Don Waddell hungry for a defenseman?
I think he's hungry for a goalie and a defenseman. I would think that the Columbus Blue Jackets are one of the teams that's been talking to the Anaheim Ducks about John Gibson. And I wouldn't be shocked if Columbus wanted to go pursue a Vladislav Gavrikov reunion. I could see that for sure.
Yeah, man, it's been that long, but I totally forgot that Gavrikov started his career there. The Gibson deal with those two sides make a lot of sense, because if you're Anaheim, you obviously have a lot of cap space. Are they maybe a team that would sit there and go, you know what, Columbus, if you're going to sweeten the pot, we'll take Merzlikins back. He can be our 25 game a year backup for Lucas Dostal now that we're ready to over the reins. And then for Columbus, you'd sit there and go, yeah, we got Gibson for 2 years, and then Jet Greaves is going to be ready by then. All those timelines really add up.
Yeah, and guess what? Columbus is pretty close to Pittsburgh, where John Gibson's from.
It's a great point as well. Let's get to our daily bets for the day, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app, use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment, whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Frank, I'm throwing weird ones out there because, again, it's the offseason, not a lot of hockey to bet on. They have who will be the Oilers' Game 1 starting goalie odds up. Stuart Skinner is the favorite at -120. John Gibson is +300. Then you have a whole bunch of other names: Allen, Pickard, Jari, Alex Lyon, Ilya Samsonov, Joseph Wall's on the board. I don't know. They're throwing anything out there. But I like any other player at +400. Maybe the Oilers surprise us a little bit.
I agree. I would go with playing the field at +400. But here's the thing. Even if they go out and get someone and they're playing with Stu Skinner in tandem, it could still be Stu Skinner, even if they went out and got someone, because he just might get the Game 1 start. It's a very risky bet.
Yeah, it is. And that's probably, again, why Stuart Skinner would be the -120 favorite for this whole thing. But there you go. Bet365. Truly never ordinary, giving hockey fans some bets to throw money down on June 26th. Let's wrap up the show, Frank, with a little bit of garbage time. You had a very quick turnaround in Los Angeles, but what can you tell us about sort of the vibes in LA and the NHL's first decentralized draft?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see it play out. I think the production value is going to be super high. I think it's going to be a great looking show in Peacock Theater. But I can't help but feel a little bit bad for the prospects that are being taken in this draft. One of the most exciting days of your career, something that you've been thinking about for a long time. And not to say that it won't be a cool spectacle or that other players haven't gotten more of a raw deal. You think about Alexis Lafreniere being in his living room during COVID. Those were truly hard times. But just the sort of feel of a city buzzing with the entire hockey world descending on it. Being in LA for, 20, 24 hours, it didn't have it. It was almost like people didn't know the draft was happening there because the group of people are so much smaller there. It's basically the top 100 prospects, their families, their agents, and then league executives and just a small smattering of media because so many teams and even media people stayed in their home market. So I get it from both sides. I think this is probably going to change and go back to the typical big event style draft that we see. I would put it on rotation between just the markets where it matters. Montreal, Toronto, pick some bigger name cities that want to do this or cool sort of destinations like a Vegas or LA or wherever it is, and leave it at that. Rotate through 6 or 8 markets. Any team that thought that they were going to go through this and save money by not having to travel your scouts there, you still had to travel all your scouts to your home market, and now you're spending more on tech and on renting out spaces to host cool events. I just think it all comes out in the wash, and we should get back to having everyone in one market, and I would actually make it way bigger than that. I would do a week-long thing where you go Board of Governors meeting, GM meeting, NHL awards, draft, and then 2 days after the draft, you have free agency right there, and free agents are coming in to meet with teams. Agents are already there. They can meet with management and GMs and hammer out deals in person, and us media people can be there to witness it all. That's what I would do to generate as much buzz as possible, but I'm not in charge.
The league went smaller. Frank Seravalli, he thinks bigger, big picture. I like it. Blow the whole thing up. Let's do a week-long bonanza. Chris drops in a good one. He says, no, Kyle from Chicago is the real loss. Remember that in Nashville with Kyle Davidson on the street? That was like one of the top moments. So good. Okay, that is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Great stuff from everybody in the YouTube. Appreciate Matthew Fairburn giving us some time. We're back tomorrow. Stephen Ellis and more because it's draft day in the NHL. We'll see you on Friday at noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.